Class is in session. Welcome, my fellow academics. We're going to get into some things today, man. Appreciate you giving me your time. But before I get into what I came to talk about today, I want you to do your boy a favor. Hit the like button, subscribe, notifications, share, the whole nine. Help me grow this channel so we can help spread the word. The theme of today's lesson is political correctness and the dangerous effects that it has on public health and public safety. It's a very important topic. Once again, y'all, appreciate it if you help me grow the channel. Like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, give your boy a little engagement. All right, appreciate it. So, of course, news has come out that the state of California and I believe the state of New York has officially declared monkeypox or declared a state of emergency for the proliferation or assumed or predicted proliferation of the monkeypox outbreak. The Biden regime, of course, just recently did the exact same thing, has officially declared a nationwide state of emergency for monkeypox. What is the significance of this and why is it important? And what I see happening in the near future when it comes to this particular issue, okay? So let's get into it, man. Let's talk about it. This here is an article from the Huffington Post. Now, I got some things laid out, some couple resources, some things. We're going to get into what's going on today. Then we're going to journey back a few decades ago. We're going to talk about some history, and we're going to bring it back forward to the present, why it is all significant, how we're going to tie it all in together. All right. So, real quick, the Huffington Post headline reads, monkeypox likely spread by sex at 2 raves in Europe, experts say. This is the leading theory to explain the spread of the disease at raves held in Spain and Belgium, a leading advisor to the World Health Organization said. Now, this is WHO. This is the World Health Organization. I know, a lot of people out there, they swear by WHO. It's a reputable source, quote unquote, and this is what they're putting out. This is what they're saying. All right. Why are they saying this and why is it important? Well, we're going to get to that. Let's move on. We're going to go dig a little bit further and go deeper into the article. It says, a leading advisor to the World Health Organization described the unprecedented outbreak of monkeypox in developed countries as a random event that might be explained by sexual behavior at 2 recent raves in Europe. Once again, this is the Huffington Post, all right? Now, of course, it's a disease that was prevalent in Africa. Now we're hearing about it elsewhere. Keep that in mind because that too is significant. All right. But that's just sort of like a brief dive into that particular article. But we don't even have to go much further into it. I think you all get the point. All right. And just a few headlines from across the news spectrum. Okay. Here we have CNET. Headline reads, monkeypox, what gay and bisexual men need to know. This is Yahoo News. As monkeypox strikes gay men, officials debate warnings to limit partners. So they're having a debate on whether or not to even tell gay men, okay, that they ought to limit their partners. This is according to Yahoo News. CNN, right? Headline reads, monkeypox is on the rise in the LGBTQ community. Here's what you need to know. This, according to CNBC, The CDC, this is the CDC now. You all swear by the CDC, correct? All right. The CDC estimates that 1.7 million gay and bisexual men face highest risk from monkeypox. This is CNBC according to the CDC. All right. Gay men brace for monkeypox. Gay community braces for monkeypox as outbreak spreads in the U.S. This is the Guardian. All right. Now, why is this significant and why am I reading this? First of all, let me give a shout out to my boy, Good Guy Juan, with a recent post that I seen him make on Instagram inspired me to come on here and do this, because he made a comment about vaccines or another and about how, the states where you find the most vaccinated people, presumably, let's just say California and New York. I don't know if this is true, in fact, but nevertheless, he said it and he spoke about vaccines and they said, well, okay, well, here we go again. And now, you're starting to hear the drumbeat, right? That there's a fear that there is a new epidemic on the rise, all right? And why is this significant? Because now we are seeing, according to so-called mainstream trusted sources, that this is an illness, okay, that began, okay, in many respects, at least when it comes to this sort of crossover into this kind of mainstream conversation. Because I don't know about many of you, but I myself had never heard of monkeypox up until recently, and now we're finding out that, well, this is some kind of African phenomenon, or phenomenon that was specific to the African continent. Don't know what countries in Africa specifically, but it was African in origin. All right, and of course, monkeypox is spread vis-a-vis close contact with an individual who has it. But of course, the disease is called monkeypox because virologists and experts believe that, well, this was a virus that was first found in monkeys. Now, remember that this was an African disease. So where is the connection between Africans on the continent and monkeys? What are the monkeys and the Africans doing with one another? Now, without getting into the theories, you can see where this is going. Remember what I said to start this talk, that this is a lesson on political correctness and the ill effects that it has on public safety and public health. Because before we even get into the gay aspect of what is taking place here, let's look at the racial aspect. Because if monkeypox is contracted through skin to skin contact with someone or something that was infected, what does this say about the Africans who may have come into close contact with monkeys? What precisely were they doing with these monkeys? All right. Now, some people may not want to, right, open up Pandora's box and go down that rabbit hole, because God forbid you say something that may be a bit controversial with respect to a protected minority class. In this case, of course, being blacks. So the whole term monkeypox is seen to be controversial or problematic amongst a lot of people because it stigmatizes black people. Okay, but it's called monkeypox because, of course, it was a disease that was, of course, specific to monkeys. But nevertheless, here we go. We're beginning to sort of add the racial component. But here's where we're going to take a dive into history, relatively recent history, because I want to talk about the HIV/AIDS epidemic and how it relates to monkeypox, okay? Because they said the exact same things about HIV/AIDS, that HIV may, in fact, be a virus that started, or a virus that was found in another animal before it made the jump to human beings. So people kind of scoffed at this notion because, remember, HIV/AIDS, Africa was also seen decades and decades ago, viewed to be this kind of the epicenter or the launching point of the HIV/AIDS crisis. So what are you saying? Are you saying that Africans are having sex with monkeys? This sort of became the thing, and that was almost laughable. Why? Because that played into a lot of folks' preconceived notion about these kind of the megalith, the structure of this kind of racism and stigmatization of cultures that were considered sort of non-Western or non-white, depending on who you ask. And so we never really got to the beginning or sort of the origin of where this HIV/AIDS outbreak came from. But we're gonna sort of get into it, all right? Because not only was HIV/AIDS seen as a uniquely African thing before it became this worldwide, became a part of a sort of global conversation. But HIV/AIDS, just like monkeypox is today, was seen back in the 70s, 80s as a gay man's disease. Now, some of you older may have been of age and, have memories and remember this sort of thing when it came to the conversation surrounding HIV/AIDS. But going back, mind you, CDC, Huffington Post, CNN, CNET, NBC, on and on and on, mainstream news outlets are saying themselves that there seems to be an underlying theme with respect to monkeypox is some kind of sex or contact, okay, between and amongst gay men. Now, think about HIV/AIDS and what we were told, okay, when HIV/AIDS became a part of the mainstream conversation. To even suggest or to declare that HIV/AIDS was a gay man's disease was seen as an example of what? Homophobia, bigotry, hatred, etc., etc. Now, what say you when we look back on monkeypox and we don't know exactly what's going to happen and how prevalent it will become, etc., etc. But 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the line, when folk will have the audacity to suggest that, well, wait a minute, monkeypox is a gay man's disease. Imagine what they're going to be saying about you in the future. Despite what they themselves said about monkeypox in the beginning, we have them on record saying this, right? Now, I hope you follow me, because we're going to go into HIV/AIDS because you can see the similarities, all right? Now, I am pulling this information directly from the CDC's website, all right? I'm going to read. Gay, bisexual, and other men who reported male-to-male sexual contact. They call those men MSMs. I don't know if I just heard about this term when I was doing research for this video. MSMs are called men who have sex with men. The acronym is MSMs. Now, these are men who don't self-identify as gay, but they have or like to engage in sexual encounters from time to time with men, but they don't self-describe as homosexuals. Okay? Take that for what you want. Take it for what you will. Now, here's the CDC. Gay, bisexual, and other men who report male-to-male sexual contact are disproportionately affected by HIV. So they are disproportionately infected. Now, this is affected, but this is the CDC. But at the same time, society says that we cannot call, or we shouldn't consider HIV/AIDS to be a gay man's disease. But how does the CDC rationalize this? Well, we're going to continue. Social and structural issues, right? Light bells should be going off for my folks out there who understand what words like social and structural mean. Social and structural issues such as HIV stigma, homophobia, discrimination, poverty, and limited access to high-quality health care influence health and outcomes and continue to drive inequities. This is the CDC. So, what are we hearing? We are hearing that HIV/AIDS affects the gay and bisexual community disproportionately, not solely, okay, it isn't solely a result of their sexual behavior, or dare I say sexual deviancy. It is about HIV stigma, homophobia, discrimination, poverty, and limited access to high quality health care. Does that make sense to anybody? Because now what you're seeing is anyone who is perceived or seen to be a part of some marginalized community from the perspective of the common liberal are in the situation that they are in because of all of the things that I've just named. People who are afflicted disproportionately with HIV/AIDS are not immune to this kind of a savior or protective narrative that is coming by way of our kind of liberal sort of do-gooders. All right. So we're going to continue. Now, this is coming from the CDC. All right. Now they go into what actually causes, or what are the number one cause, all right, for HIV/AIDS and how it is contracted. This is also from the CDC. It reads, how does HIV spread? In the United States, HIV is spread mainly by, it's going to get a little vulgar, so if you got some kids, you want to turn the volume down and listen to it later when they're not around. Having sex with someone who has HIV in general, okay, it says anal sex is the highest sexual risk behavior. Receptive anal sex, they call this bottoming for you who are unfamiliar with the terms within the so-called gay community, is riskier than insertive anal sex, which they call topping. All right. Vaginal sex is the second highest risk behavior. Having many sexual partners or having other STDs can increase the chance, okay, of getting HIV through sex. And then lastly, sharing needles, etc., etc. All right. So having anal sex is number one. They go down to vaginal sex, and they go down to having having many sex partners or having STDs can increase the chances of getting HIV through sex. There is a famous, somewhat infamous, a virologist, a German man who some of you may or may not be familiar with. I don't know. He's a name that sort of comes to mind. His name is Peter Duesberg. I think that's how you say his name. If you search it, just sound it out, you may be able to find some of his talks, lectures, and research. Well, he made himself infamous for suggesting that HIV/AIDS doesn't even exist. Now, I know there's a lot of theories out there. Some people say it doesn't exist. It does exist. The government created it. It's a conspiracy. They really have a cure for it, such and such and so forth. Was it created by government in a laboratory? Is it some phantom? Does it not even exist? Well, I'm not even going to get into the theories about the origins of HIV/AIDS, but what men like Peter Duesberg and others suggest is that what led to the outgrowth or the proliferation of HIV/AIDS amongst the gay and bisexual community was, in fact, their lifestyle choices, their drug usage, and their level of promiscuity. The CDC says it itself that you increase the number of sexual partners that you have, you increase the risk that you will, in fact, contract HIV, okay, which can lead to AIDS. But what do we know about men who have sex with other men? Men who have sex with other men have a tendency to have a larger degree of sexual partners than those who engage in heterosexual relationships. And why is this? Well, because male to female sexual relationships, or should I say, let me put it this way. Men display riskier, and this is true across the board with respect to male behavior. Males who are attracted to males are nevertheless still male. They're still men. I know that's a difficult concept for a lot of folk today to understand. But men engage in more risk averse behavior by nature because men are more prone to risk taking, which is why men make up the majority of prisoners throughout the world, or let's just keep it particular to the United States, because men are prone to be more violent and be more aggressive and so on and so forth. Okay. Which is also why men lead the pack when it comes to innovation, because by nature, men are risk takers. Anytime you engage in a sexual encounter, by nature, you are taking a risk, not just not just, in terms of contracting an illness, but sex can be a very risky practice because there is this kind of aggressive physical encounter between two separate human beings. Women have more discernment with respect to who they choose to have sex with because having sex serves a biological purpose, which is procreation. Back before the advancements of modern medicine, many women died during childbirth. So to even run the risk of having sex and getting pregnant, okay, women were literally risking their lives just to have a sexual encounter. Okay. Men are, the male of the species, many, if not all mammals, the male tends to be the bigger of the two. All right. So women put themselves at risk of physical harm, okay, when they have sex with the male of the species. So females, biologically and from a social standpoint, they act as a regulatory mechanism for men in our sexual deviancy. All right. Now you fast forward to event. Most men just sex all the time, sex with whom they don't care. But women control access to sex. Okay, because women have to consent. All right, we know that there are some horrible men out there who do bad things, but for the most part, most men aren't just clubbing women over the head and dragging them into their, unless you're some sick, perverted serial rapist or something. We know those men exist, but that's a small percentage of men, an extremely small percentage of men. But women control access to sex. When you remove a female from the equation and put it in an all male context with men who are willing to have sex with one another, the rate of promiscuity increases because men are more prone to engage in risky sort of behavior. Some research, there was a gentleman who, I'm going to say his name, and I know he's kind of like a firebrand within the realm of conservative speaking. He is, in fact, a conservative activist, a man by the name of David Horowitz, who did a lot of research on the AIDS, HIV epidemic back in the 70s and back in the 80s when it was sort of becoming a panic moment in America. And he says that he did interviews and did talks with men, gay men privately. This was sort of, and this was all a result of the civil rights or the civil rights wing, or the gay wing, of the civil rights movement. This was the gay liberation movement that they say sprang up right about 1968, 1969. So fast forward into the 1970s, 1980s, you had this sort of thing where now gays and homosexuals were beginning to be considered a protected class. Some gay men, according to the research of David Horowitz, I don't have that cited or written down or anything, I'm just going on top of my head. I remember him distinctly saying in one of his lectures, you can find it online, that gay men that he spoke to claimed to have had sex with anywhere between 200 to 2,000 men a year, which relates to this particular article. This is the Daily Caller. It says 1 in 5 gay men who get monkeypox, or who got monkeypox, had sex with 10 or more people before getting infected, says the CDC. Now, this is the Daily Caller citing research from the CDC. Once again, the CDC even says the more sexual partners you have, of course, the higher the risk. Now, rewinding back to Peter Duesberg, who claimed that HIV/AIDS doesn't even exist. It was a term that was given to someone with a compromised immune system, but this immune system was compromised due to prolonged a contact or it's this kind of constant contraction of these various illnesses that were passed on vis-a-vis sexual contact. All right. So pretty much a gay man's immune system is theorized to have like broken down, right? Because of this kind of constant contraction of various sexually transmitted diseases that were not, in fact, HIV/AIDS. There is a phenomenon, I don't know if you all are familiar with this, within the gay and homosexual community called bug chasing. This is a real thing. I don't know if you have never heard of it. I'm going to read the definition of it without kind of coming off the top of my head and giving my own definition of it. I pulled this from Wikipedia, and you can search this: bug chasing. Bug chasing is a rare practice of intentionally seeking immunodeficiency virus infection through sexual contact. Bug chasers, those who eroticize HIV, constitute a subculture of barebackers, men who have unprotected sex with other men. It is exceedingly uncommon for men to self-identify as bug chasers, but among those who do, their behavior does constantly match this identification. Instead, they often seek ambiguous sexual situations rather than ones in which their partner is known to have HIV. By 2003, the concept had entered the public consciousness after Rolling Stone published an article titled "Bug Chasers: The Men Who Long to Be HIV Positive." Okay? So, why are men? There's a similar phenomenon going on right now. It reminds me of this. It's called transableism, if I'm correct, because there is a kind of critical theory associated with something called disability studies. These are people who identify with being disabled, even though they're not. You may have familiarized yourself or came across this situation a few years ago, which sort of made national headlines. Of a woman, particularly in the kind of right-wing media sphere, as they call it. This woman who intentionally blinded herself by pouring bleach into her eyes because she identified with a blind person. She wanted to be blind, okay? What is going on with this obsession with wanting to be disabled, right? It kind of reminds me of the kind of recent hullabaloo over Beyonce and her usage of the word spaz, right? This kind of ableism, as they're calling it, because once again, there's a critical theory associated with able-bodiedness, right? The able-bodied versus those who are disabled. There you have another dichotomy onto which a kind of Marxian dialectic is then kind of superimposed onto this dichotomy. So now, at the time when all of this was going on, okay, going back to the HIV/AIDS, there were people that were shouting to the hilt, well, we have to do something as a matter of public safety and public health because of this kind of well, at the time, put it this way, lawmakers were turning a blind eye to what was going on in places like San Francisco and in Greenwich and New York and these various places, because legislatures, lawmakers, they knew exactly where these gay men would congregate, okay, at these various bathhouses and so on and so forth, okay. But they did very little to stop it. And as a matter of fact, they did nothing at all. Why? Because, of course, that homosexuality was then, even, can you imagine? Look at where we are today. Look at what's being protected and tolerated today. But back then, when homosexuality was more of a sort of closeted phenomenon, those in power dare not touch it because it was simply seen as an alternative lifestyle. So we couldn't shut down the bathhouses. We couldn't go up rounding up and arresting these male prostitutes, because of we didn't want to persecute a protected minority who were simply living an alternative lifestyle. you can find the origin of this kind of laissez-faire approach to this sort of sexual kind of deviant behavior. You can find the root of it in the writings of a so-called scholar who is believed by many to be the creator of what became known as queer theory, named Gayle Rubin. Gayle Rubin's research, or her, should I say, her so-called scholarship, and also the scholarship of another radical sex positive feminist by the name of Judith Butler. Remember those names, Gayle Rubin and Judith Butler. We may go and do something on them in the near future. And so, like I said, they told us that HIV/AIDS was not a gay man's disease. But once again, I'm going back and I'm reading from the CDC. The overall goal, according to the CDC, when it comes to the ending the epidemic in the United States, the overall goal, according to the CDC, is to decrease the estimated number of new HIV infections to 9,300 per year by 2015, and down to 3,000 by 2030. Now, this is the goal of the CDC. Their research only goes as far as 2019, or at least that's the only thing that I can find. It says, of the 34,800 estimated new HIV infections in the U.S. in 2019, 70%, 2,500 approximately, were among gay and bisexual men. 70% of new HIV/AIDS infections in 2019 were amongst gay men. Now think about that. Because like I say, unprotected anal sex, also known as condomless anal sex, is a major risk factor for passing the virus. This is according to a website called Very Well Health. How is it that we are not allowed to point out the obvious? Remember what political correctness is and what political correctness does, okay? We aren't allowed to acknowledge what is objectively true because, according to the postmodern Marxists and the very foundation of Marxism itself, according to its precepts, that there is in fact no objective truth to be had. Only a sort of truth that is propped up by the people in power for the sole purpose of them attempting to legitimize why they have and why those who do not have not. So everything is structurally determinate, meaning that everything is subjective, even all the way down to what we as human beings value. Because now we are being told that homosexuality and heterosexuality, those particular lifestyles or lifestyle choices, are morally on par with one another, because who is to say what is right and what is wrong with respect to sex? Where are we going with this? In her essay, I mentioned her a moments ago, a woman by the name of Gayle Rubin, in her essay entitled Thinking Sex, she, in a political, in all political correct fashion, refers to pedophilia as cross-generational encounters. And she thinks that cross-generational encounters are fine, because anytime that there's a stigma, so-called, associated with someone or a person's particular behavior, we are then witnessing firsthand an example of prejudice and injustice. This, according to a website titled headline.com. Around the world, MSM, remember what MSM means, men who have sex with men, are 25 times more likely than average to contract HIV. And this is a report that comes from UNAIDS, an organization called UNAIDS. So gay men are 25 times more likely than average to contract HIV, but we are not allowed to call HIV/AIDS a gay man's disease. Nor will we be allowed in the near future to call Monkey Pox a gay man's disease. Now, I don't know, like I say, I don't know exactly what's going to come of this. We do have an election coming up in November. All right. We saw what happened with respect to COVID leading up to 2020 and how COVID was used as a pretext to violate the Constitution in order to allow for some so-called funny business to occur in the 2020 election. I won't get off into that. It's a conversation we'll save for another day. But remember, even going back to COVID, what did we know about COVID? We knew from the beginning because they told us, the very same authority figures who are now telling us all that they know up until this point about monkeypox. They told us the same thing about the coronavirus. What did they tell us? We knew from the get-go that what? It was an illness that is particularly haphazardous, potentially deadly to the elderly. We knew that it was deadly to people who had comorbidities like obesity and diabetes and asthma, whatever the case was. So we remember. But mind you, they wanted to treat COVID as this kind of universal thing, this kind of umbrella thing where everyone is being expected to go about dealing with the coronavirus in the same manner, even though they were not at as high a risk, okay, as some of the other folk. But now we are all being treated with a broad brush. So what are they going to do with respect to monkeypox if its presence expands and continues to grow? What does that mean for heterosexual people? Okay, they're going to be made to ignore the facts. And they told us, what kind of psych warfare is this? This kind of gaslight. They tell us one thing and then later on they tell us something else. Same exact thing with the coronavirus. We saw it over and over. Masks don't help. Now masks do help. They want everyone to get vaccinated, but then, they come out later and say, well, the vaccination doesn't exactly prevent you from contracting coronavirus. It can help mitigate the symptoms, but yet they still call it a vaccine that does not immunize you. It simply mitigates symptoms. Well, then what you have effectively done is change the very definition of a vaccine. Why are they doing this? What is really going on, and what is to come of this in the future? I'm gonna wrap this up. I'm gonna wrap up the session, but I just want to read a couple more things. This is from a man. Speaking of going back to HIV/AIDS, this man, Matt Foreman, he is the former director of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. He admitted himself, these are his words. Internally, going back to all the numbers that I cited about HIV infection among gay and bisexual men. Internally, when these numbers came out, the established, he puts the word established in scare quotes, the established gay community seems to have a collective shrug, as if this isn't our problem. Folks, with 70% of the people in this country living with AIDS living with HIV, to be precise, this is a quote, being gay or bi, we cannot deny that HIV is a gay disease. We have to own that and face up to it. This is Matt Foreman, former director of the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. So what do we hear about we don't care, when we point out the obvious, when we try to tell people the truth so that we can go about trying to solve the problem, right? Or remedy or mitigate the consequences of certain things, we are told to ignore the truth. Well, you can't get to the problem or even begin to address it if you aren't willing to tell the truth. All right. So we think that gay, there's no hope for gay. There's no help for them if they are being afflicted by certain things, right? HIV, AIDS, and now we have monkeypox. Okay. Well, we're going to dispel this myth quickly because this is what happened. For those of you who don't know, reading from an article, organized gays have blocked blood screening for HIV, fought the closing of homosexual bathhouses, which I mentioned, advocated for the legalization of both male and female prostitution. What is the left doing with our culture? all manner of deviancy, drug use. Look at San Francisco, Portland, Seattle. Prostitution, open air drug use, urination and defecation in the streets. We're facing a kind of moral crisis right now that is brought about by the breakdown of societal norms, sex being key amongst them. They shut down contact tracing and sexual partner notification. They opposed criminalizing the deliberate infection of another person with HIV/AIDS. Remember what happened in California? To knowingly infect someone or to have unprotected sex with someone without notifying them that you are in fact HIV positive used to be a crime. It is now a misdemeanor. This happened in California a couple of years ago. And promoting the use of condoms, which have a 6 to 8% failure rate. So this is what the homosexual lobby did. So people weren't allowed to give real solutions to help fight the problem, okay? Because how dare you tell us that what we are doing is in fact wrong, or better yet, in fact hurting us. But it isn't so much hurting them, it is also hurting the taxpayer. When we talk about public health, we're talking about public safety. Who do you think is funding this? Who do you think is paying for this? Who funds the CDC, the NIH, and these various administrative bureaucracies and institutions? Well, of course, you are the taxpayer. And I'm going to get into some more stuff. Oh, and by the way, listen to what they said, because, of course, I'm a bigot. You know, I'm a right-wing extremist, or because I'm black, I'm an Uncle Tom and a coon and a sellout, and so on and so forth. But listen to what they were saying back then. This was a conspiracy theory that was being floated around. This whole notion that HIV/AIDS was created by the government. I don't know. It may not. Let you figure that out. This is a quote. And perhaps the most extreme state of self-accusal, a man by the name of Harry Hay, founder of the first, this is what this person calls, homophile organization in the United States called Mattachine Society, the Mattachine Society. I don't know if I'm mispronouncing that. He accused conservatives of developing and spreading the AIDS virus. Hay claimed, this is a quote from Hay, "I share with many people the secret sneaking sensation on one level or another that AIDS may have been introduced by reckless Republican reactionaries of the stripe of Ronald Reagan, but not Reagan because he's too stupid." That was Harry Hay, the founder of the first homophile organization in the United States. So at the time, remember, Reagan would say, well, he didn't care. But see, we talked about dare, stay off drugs, just don't do drugs. Don't engage in promiscuous gay sex. Make better lifestyles. But see, that's not enough, because we're dealing with all kinds of structural issues and societal issues. And since the individual cannot make better choices on behalf of themselves, we must find a way to do what? Redistribute income, redistribute wealth, and redistribute property to help the people who are being negatively affected by their own individual decisions. It's two separate ways of looking at the world. One of them gives power to the individual. The other gives power, and influence to the state. You figure it out. Now, AIDS now claims an extremely high and disproportionate share of limited funds and prevention funds. Now, this is what many of you probably don't know. During the decade of 2011 to 2020, annual National Institute for Health, the NIH, expenditures per death for HIV/AIDS were 232 times that for heart disease, 211 times greater than stroke, 49 times that for lung disease, and 49 times that for cancer. The federal government alone has spent $600 billion on AIDS and its victims. These federal expenditures work out to more than $800,000 per person who died of HIV/AIDS during the epidemic. And this number does not include direct assistance for state and local government and private funding. Once these bureaucracies are set up, they never go away. Inflation, these very things, you wonder why you're taxed, you wonder why. Okay. The value, the power of your dollar has been decreasing over the decades because of the growth of the administrative state. To help what? To help these protected classes. Even though AIDS deaths have decreased by more than 2/3 since its peak in 1996. But federal funding has more than doubled during this time. So the victimizing, or as they say that we victimize homosexuals and gays because we stigmatize them because we call out certain things. Okay, fine. But you have to understand that it is the activist class who are doing these people the most harm for the sake of benefiting themselves socially and monetarily, because this is big business. Funding has doubled. Who's getting this money? What is this money being spent on? With the advancement of medicine, AIDS is no longer an automatic death sentence. It's just kind of debilitating over the years, but you can live with it and you'll be fine. But yet and still, we're still pumping money into it. So I'm going to end it here. Just something for you all to think about. Because those of you who aren't a part of the alternative lifestyle, the LGBTQ plus, I wonder what the plus stands for. Wink, wink. We'll see in the near future. I can guarantee you that. But what implications is this going to have on the wider society in the coming years? But remember, what they said about monkeypox, what they're saying about monkeypox now, they said the same thing about AIDS then. The same thing that they know about monkeypox, they know about AIDS now. So when they try and usurp the United States Constitution, because, well, we don't want large swaths of people gathering together in places because we want to prevent the spread. So they can't go and vote together. They have to vote by mail. But yet and still they can do what they call it, the Door Alley Festival in San Francisco. They just held it a couple of days ago. They're still having gay pride parades and, these organizations that, once again, according to the mainstream media, they are encouraging gay men. Yeah, you can still do your little festival, but try to limit the amount of sexual partners that you have, is what they're telling them. They don't give a shit about these people the same way that they don't care about you and me. They use this as an excuse to grow the administrative state, to shrink the size of the private sector, right? It's another form of wealth and income redistribution. It empowers the state because it helps facilitate the moral decay of our society. And so think about that. And don't let them forget what they said. Because you watch to dare suggest that monkeypox is a gay man's disease. It's going to mean that you, sir, you, madam, are in fact a bigot. Now the question is, are you going to let them get away with it? Class dismissed.